in my opinion, one of the things that we overprivilege in the conversation about public speaking or presentations is the element of delivery. And we underprivilege or emphasize things like content and organization. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about delivery, but the thing that I want to stress here is that delivery might be able to cover up some mistakes in your presentation, but a cosmetic overhaul of a lack of content or poor organization will eventually fade and decay. And the impression of being a good public speaker is about so much more than just how you deliver your content. But I think because there can be so much anxiety and apprehension about speaking in front of others that we think just about the mechanics of speaking in front of others. And so what I want you to think about is how could you use your delivery to engage your audience in a way that isn't slapping makeup on a pig, but is being true to who you are and lending your voice to an issue. So let's take a look. The first thing that we need to understand is delivery is not about do these 5 things and that's the effect you'll have on your audience. There's no script here for delivery. The best speakers that you find are those who are themselves, and their delivery flows out of who they are. But there has been this mentality, sort of like an assembly line. If you can maintain eye contact for 70% of the time, or look just above their heads, or gesture and hold your hand at a specific angle to illustrate a point and gain their interest, or raise your voice at a certain time, that you'll somehow have a special magical effect on your audience. And what we know is that that's not true. That if you spend enough time listening to or engaging with speakers, whether it's a sermon or a politician campaigning or even a professor, what you'll notice, you'll begin to pick up on patterns in their behavior. And sometimes you can point back to other people, other speakers, maybe more prominent or famous speakers, and you can pick up on where some of those behaviors came from. But at the end of the day, the goal here is not to mimic some other person's voice. I don't want to hear someone else's voice when you're speaking. I want to hear your voice. You have something to contribute. And don't allow the belief that you're not a good communicator, or that you're going to stumble over your words, or that you're just a soft-spoken person, that we're not going to still have a lasting impression from your presentation, that you somehow have to adopt someone else's voice. I still struggle with apprehension related to public speaking from time to time, and some of that is due to insecurities that I have, that I'm not expressive enough, or that I won't be able to communicate my care toward my audience because they won't be able to tell that I care about them, that sometimes I can have sort of a sour look on my face even when I am not thinking about anything in particular, and I don't want that to come across. Or sometimes I stumble over my words. I start speaking too fast and I start to stumble. And there are things that I've had to work on to navigate this idea, but don't fall into the temptation of thinking, if I could just sound like somebody else, if I could go through this assembly line and pick up something here, something here, something here, and put it together, and be, a combination of my 3 favorite pastors or speakers or politicians, that I would somehow be, better. We want your voice, no one else's. When we think about delivery, there are a couple of things that tend to be sore spots, tend to be things that people who are new to public speaking tend to struggle with. So let's take a look at what those are. The first one would be facial expression. And I've already talked about my own battle with facial expressions, but sometimes, especially early on, we're so focused on what we're saying and trying to remember all of the things we wanted to say that our facial expressions tend to just look like we're a deer in headlights, or that we're just reading off of a teleprompter behind our eyelids. Your facial expression can communicate so much. So start with a smile, and throughout your presentation, remind yourself that it's okay to express what you're thinking. Don't be so rigid to what you're saying that you forget to think and stay present. When we deliver extemporaneously, one of the things that we know is that the purpose is not to recite our speech, but our purpose is to engage in a conversation with our audience. I don't know about you, but there are times where I'm in a conversation with somebody and a thought comes to me and I follow that train of thought. What often happens, my face communicates that something has happened before my mouth does. Don't be afraid to communicate with your entire face. Your eyes, your mouth, your eyebrows, and your expressiveness, all are a part of who you are. Now, there's a difference between sort of clowning it up and just being yourself. One thing I will say is that when you present online, you're compressed into 2 dimensions when you're presenting a video. And so you need to perhaps be slightly more expressive than you would be in person. And I don't mean, a lot, maybe just like 2% more expressive when you're online. That will help you communicate through the lens to your audience. The second thing is eye contact. Now, we can talk about this in person and online because these are 2 different things, but we associate in our culture eye contact with trustworthiness. When a person can't make eye contact, we believe that this person is hiding something or is nervous or is less credible. Now, this isn't true, but nonetheless, that's what we associate eye contact with. So it's important to maintain eye contact, but don't stare at your audience. If you have habits about eye contact and how you think and how that affects the way you act, be yourself. I don't just stare into the camera lens. I look around because that's how I am normally. So I shouldn't change something that's a part of who I am and my personality when I get in front of an audience. Now, when you are presenting through a camera lens, either online or your laptop or a camera, what you need to be mindful of is that your audience is the lens. So if you're in a Zoom meeting, the temptation is to look at the pictures on the screen, or perhaps you're doing a virtual interview and you want to look at the person that you are talking to. I would say that's a fairly normal habit. But remember, their eyes are the camera lens. So maintaining eye contact online looks a lot like looking into a camera lens, which is tough because then you don't get to see a lot of the nonverbal cues and feedback that your audience is giving you. Try standing in a studio with no one else around you to get some of those cues. It's a bit challenging. But think about how your eye contact might communicate things like immediacy, that you care about your audience, that you're there with them, that there is some sort of relationship that you are forming. The first two that we've talked about have to do with your face, because so much is communicated through your face. But the other thing that I want us to think about as we think about our delivery and how we're engaging our audience is movement. Now, this could be gestures, it could be your posture, it could be your physical movement in front of your audience. Now, if you're sitting in front of a computer screen looking into a webcam, movement's gonna be a little tough. We're really limited to gestures and posture. The key idea here is to communicate confidence and comfortability. That you don't look so rigid and uptight that nothing ever moves. And we have to wonder, are you breathing or are you just delivering this all in one breath? At the same time, if you tend to be a little bit more straight-backed and not as expressive, be yourself, but be the version of yourself that is comfortable. Think about how you interact in conversations with friends. That's the you we want to see in front of the stage, in front of an audience, in front of your webcam. Treat us like your friends that you're having a conversation with. So, just like we need to express, 2% more when we're online, in our movement, in our gestures, we need to be expressive because you can't really see below here. So if all of my gestures are down beneath the table, you're not going to see those. You might see my shoulders shrug, but I'm gonna have to bring my gestures up a little bit and use the space between me and the camera to provide some depth so that I'm not so two-dimensional. Think about your gestures. It's not a bad idea to plan out a few if you feel like you end up feeling stilted, static, you're lacking in your delivery. Plan some out until you get really comfortable. Once you start to get comfortable, the gestures will follow. The last thing here is just a mentality. This phrase, carry out versus delivery, comes from an old professor of mine who talked about this idea that delivery in a speech is like ordering a pizza. If you call and you ask for delivery and they give you carry out, it means that you have to do a lot of the work. You have to go get the pizza, you have to go into the store or curbside pickup maybe. Delivery is easier on your audience. Carry out makes them work toward you. So think about, am I delivering this speech or is this carry out? I want your presentation to be a conversation, and I want you to feel comfortable giving that presentation and entering into that conversation. Don't forget, we're here for your voice, no one else's. So lean into it. Let us hear you.